Turn it up, swashbucklers. You're listening to Under the Crossbones, episode number 20. My name is Phil Johnson. I am your host. Thank you for listening in. Always appreciate you being here. If you're new to the show, welcome. There's lots of back episodes that you can check out, but as of today, we are on episode number 20. You can find all the show notes for this episode at underthecrossbones.com/020. And next episode, right? This podcast will be old enough to drink. So it's all good. Are you ready for Christmas? Are you ready? It's coming quickly. It's almost here. It is a mere less than 10 days away. It's here. Christmas is coming. We got our tree up. I've got pirate stuff all over my tree. My girlfriend hates it. Yeah, it's great. Even more importantly, though, more important than Christmas, are you ready for Star Wars? That's all I'm saying. Are you ready for Star Wars? I am very ready for Star Wars. I'm so sick of reading about Star Wars that I need to see this movie so that I can stop reading about it, essentially, because that's all my news feeds are talking about is Star Wars and what might happen and what won't happen and who's involved and who's saying this and who's saying that. Let's just get to the movie already, is all I'm saying. Unfortunately, I won't be able to see the movie right away because I am gigging the night it comes out. Which means I'm going to have to stay off of the internet and plug my ears and hum the Flintstones theme for probably that entire day and half of the next day until I can get to the movie theater to see it. I'm going to go see it on the 19th, I think, hopefully, if I can get some tickets. But so it's going to be busy. Look, today on the show, this is going to be a really good one. They're all good. I enjoy them all. You're going to really like this one. Today on the show, I've got SR Staley is my guest for the interview, and he goes by SR Staley. He's an author of the Panther Bay book series. He's got 2 books out right now, Pirate of Panther Bay and Tortuga Bay, and I haven't read them yet, but I have to. I haven't had a chance to read them yet because there's too much going on. But this is a really great interview. We talk about lots of cool stuff. We're going to talk about how pirates. He's an economist. Now, how weird is that? The guy writes pirate books, and he's an economist. Okay, and he's not the only one out there. So. This is going to be good. So we talk a lot about like how old pirate crews, some of the economics of it, and how they compare to, say, modern gangs. We talk about we're going to talk about how to like some writing stuff, like his process for writing, how to advance the plot with a fight scene, not a dumb, useless fight scene just for the sake of fighting, but how to actually advance a plot with a fight scene. We're going to talk about why he decided to use a female protagonist in the book. Isabella is the main character's name, and how he deals with the whole idea of pirates didn't like females on their ships and all that kind of stuff. And then he actually we're going to talk also about why he set the time period, why he did. So there's lots of good, not only piratey stuff in this interview, but lots of good. If you are a writer at all, there's lots of good writing craft type of good stuff in this book. So we're going to come up on that interview. It's going to be super fun. I had a long week. Just before I was recording this right now, I was in fixing my dishwasher because not a rich man can't afford to have the repair guy come out if I can possibly fix it first. And it was one of those things where we put all the stuff in, and then we put the little the dissolvey packet in there. You know, the little I don't know what you call them, the little dissolvey packet of detergent in there, and it came out undissolved. And then we tried it again with the different packet, and it came out also undissolved, and I had to figure it out. So I was in taking my dishwasher apart. Now, I am not mechanically inclined. Know that about me, not mechanically inclined. Dexterous, yes, I can handle a guitar, I can handle many musical instruments, not mechanically inclined. And so taking anything apart scares the crap out of me because there's a good chance it's not going back together the same way it came apart. But so far, I managed to clean out the little vent, and I'm running some vinegar through it, and the dishwasher is running right now, and I'm just hoping that the stupid thing works because it's December and I've got enough things to spend my money on without having to repair the dishwasher too. But also, I was thank you to everybody that came out to the show at the shows, plural, at the Mill Casino in Coos Bay, Oregon on Wednesday night. Super fun. Mean Dave and I drove 10 and a half hours to get there. We had just enough time to check in, have a little nap, and then get on stage and do 2 shows. We did the 6 o'clock show, which was good. It's 6 o'clock in a casino. See, it's the old people show. It's a little lower key. than the average show. And then we did the 8 o'clock show, which was a younger crowd, and they were into it, man. So great shows all the way around. Thanks to everybody that came out for that. I have a couple shows left this month. I don't gig as much around the holidays, but you can catch me this Thursday, December the 17th. I will be at Trek Wine in Novato, California. I'll be featuring for Johnny Steele that night. If you've never seen Johnny Steele, the man is a legend of Bay Area comedy. He's so great and such a nice guy. That's going to be a really fun show. Friday, December the 18th, I will be headlining at the Rendezvous Wine Bar in Campbell, California. And then I'm going to take some holidays off. And I will be on stage New Year's Eve at the Marin Showcase Theater, which is in San Rafael, California. I will be the MC for the Best of the San Francisco Comedy Competition show there. Beautiful theater. It's going to be a fantastic show. Kabir Singh, a buddy of mine, is going to be headlining. He won the competition 2 years ago. I have not done the San Francisco Comedy Competition since 2007, where I had my ass handed to me. But it's been a while, and I haven't had a chance to do it since then because I've been busy doing other things I'll tell you about later. But yeah, so if New Year's Eve, and if you're in the North Bay area at the Marin Showcase Theater, it's going to be a great show. Make sure you get your tickets soon because that show sells out every year. It's going to be fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. All right. So what else we got? If you are enjoying the show, please make sure that you're subscribed. And if you want to help support the show, that would be awesome. You can go to underthecrossbones.com/support. There you can just give us a donation through PayPal. That's always nice. You can click on the Amazon banner and buy some stuff for yourself and get that last-minute Christmas shopping done. You got to do it. Got all mine done just the other day. If you click on the banner, you go to Amazon, you buy some stuff. I get a little kickback. Does not cost you anything more except one little tiny insignificant click. That's all it takes. Also on there, you can check out sponsorship information. If you would like to sponsor a show or a selection of shows, it's very cheap to do that. In fact, SR Staley, as you heard probably on last week's episode, is a sponsor of this show. And I was going to have him on for an interview anyway, but he was generous enough to also sponsor some shows, a few shows there. And then let's see. You can also find us underthecrossbones.com, right? That's the main site. Facebook/underthecrossbones if you're a Facebooky type person. On Twitter, you can find us at twitter.com/undercrossbones. No, because the Twitter, Twitter's all about not a lot of characters, and I'm always about big, long names. So I didn't have room for the. So just under Crossbones at Twitter. And then if you want to get that, the ebook, the Alexander Exquemelin Pirates of Panama ebook, you can grab it on the website. Or if you're driving, if you're jogging, if you're out and about, all you have to do is text pirate and your email address to 94253. So you just get on your smartphone, your piratey smartphone, and you text pirate with an I, not the Y spelling. Pirate plus your email address to 94253, and it'll kick you back the link to download that very cool Alexander Exquemelin ebook, which is a seminal classic in pirate history. So let's get into we got comedy today. We got some music. I'll tell you a little bit about that after the interview. So let's check it out. Let's get into our interview with SR Staley. Here we go. You and I just met recently, and I have not had a chance to read your books yet because I didn't know they existed, and now I do. But tell us a little bit about what the Panther Bay series is all about.
Yeah, the Panther Bay series is really about a young woman who has escaped from a sugar plantation in Hispaniola in the 1780s, and she finds herself as captain of a pirate ship. And so the Panther Bay series chronicles her adventures, and really it's her life, because she escaped as a teenager and she ends up in the pirating world. And if you're a slave and you're an escaped slave, there's no point in going back on land. And then so she's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, in the sense that she really has no place to go without her life being in danger. So it's really about how the danger of the pirating life is actually preferable to the near certain death that would come if she tried to get back on land. And so the books really go through different aspects of her life and different events that change her view of the world and how she grows as a human being, but also has lots of action in it.
That sounds great. And I just had a question. What the heck was I going to ask you? It just left my brain as soon as I opened my mouth. Oh yeah, so I mean that was the case for a lot of the pirates at the time. Was that it was being a pirate was preferable to whatever they were going to be doing online because they were out of work as a soldier or all that kind of stuff. So did that kind of history play into your thought processes on the plot?
Yeah, it really did. Because I think one of the interesting things that we lose when we sort of take a 21st century look at the world and we sort of try and think back in the 16th, 17th, and even the 18th century is how rotten life was back then. And your choices really were not that significant or not that great. And so particularly in the golden age of pirates, which of course we know in the Caribbean is about the 1700s or so, that your choices were not. It's really a question of how did you want to die. Did you want to die sort of starve out of work on land, or do you want to sort of at least get some glory as a pirate or whatever it might be? But really, the whole notion that we had a life where we'd have shelter and food reliably and we'd have strong relationships with people really was something to be aspired to as an ideal, and it wasn't part of the real world back then. And it also factored into the particular time that I set these stories. So these stories are not in the golden age, and it's really 1780, 1781, because I wanted a story that was a little bit more advanced or had progressed a little bit more in terms of social dynamics and sort of the economy and culture of the times. And plus we had lots of stories about the golden age. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, what if we put a pirate later, after supposedly the pirates had been purged from the Caribbean, and because they still existed, we just don't hear a lot about them. Right. And but it also gave me a really interesting time, as it turns out, because that was also the time of the American Revolution, and also the time when a lot of these islands were beginning to think about their own independence. And those are themes that I like to work into my stories. So it worked out really well that way too.
Yeah, that's great. That sounds like it'd be a really untapped sort of time period to put those stories in. And what was your decision process like about putting using a female protagonist?
Yeah, actually, it's in some ways it's sort of a funny story. And it actually the Pirate series came out of luck. I wish I could say that I felt I was born with this calling to write a Pirate series, but that's not really what happened. I had written another novel, and I had a literary agent at the time, and she tried to shop it around, and she wasn't having much success, but she had heard about another historical romance section being created by one of the big publishing houses. So she came to me and she said, look, what do you think about writing a historical romance? And I'm like, well, I'm a white guy, and sort of at the time I was in my 40s or my 30s. And I said, I don't know much about historical romance, but you know what? I'm always up for a challenge. So I kind of said, okay, well, every author sort of thinks about before you start a story, what are you passionate about? Because if you don't have a passion for your writing, it's really hard to write a good story. So I said, you know what? I've really been interested in pirates ever since, I was a kid. Classic Disney World, Go Pirates of the Caribbean, that type of stuff. And, sure. And then sort of watching the movies. So I said, okay, I'll write a pirate story and I'll make it a historical romance and we'll see what happens. But then I was 50 pages into the manuscript and I realized it was a guy pirate who was actually the lead character. And I said, this is really boring. We have all sorts of stories about guy pirates because most of the pirates were men. And so, but then I said, well, what if I make it a woman? And if I make it a woman, everything gets a lot more interesting at that point. And so basically what I did is I re-envisioned the story as a woman at this time. And then it actually works out that you can't have a normal pathway into piracy if you're a woman. It just didn't happen. We had Anne Bonny and Mary Read and a couple of others. And we do have a case. We have Grace O'Malley in Ireland who inherited a bunch of ships and ran a sort of pirate fleet off of the coast of Ireland, and we had a few in Asia. But in terms of the Caribbean, which is where I had the setting of my story, that was not the pathway. But there were a lot of slave revolts in the Caribbean that a lot of people don't know about. And so it's quite plausible that a woman would escape during one of those revolts. And then where would she go? And it's possible that you could find your way into the pirating life that way. So that's where the hook came in. And I'll tell you, as an author and as a storyteller, it has opened up so many really cool places to go with the character. It is. I am dealing with issues that are they're just really great to sort of tease out new parts of a story and how the characters react to different things. And of course, if you follow pirate history, pirates for the most part hated women on their ship.
I was just about to ask you about that.
Yeah. So the one place where I have some creative license is how Isabella, who's the lead character, ends up becoming the captain of the pirate ship. It's, if you suspend a little bit of belief in the real world, the pathway is plausible. But at the end of the day, she, like any pirate captain, she has to prove herself. And pirates were pretty practical people at the end of the day. If you could prove yourself, they would accept you no matter how many warts and scars and limbs you'd lost. And so she does prove herself. But that antipathy, that sort of antagonism, or that suspicion around women on pirate ships and on ships in general plays really importantly into the themes of the first book, which is the Pirate of Panther Bay, because that's real. And so somehow I have to have her grapple with that, or else it's not really historical fiction anymore.
Right. That's so now how you've got there's 2 books in the series out so far, right? The first one was Pirate of Panther Bay. The second, the current one that came out this year is Tortuga Bay, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And how many books are you planning on doing in the series?
Well, right now we've got a 5-book series. And with Southern Yellow Pine Publishing, which is my publisher. But honestly, this is a story that could go on for as long as I have readers that are interested in a story. So I grew up, my first series that I remember reading about sort of the seafaring life and fighting sail was the Horatio Hornblower series. That started with 1 book, and then we ended up, I think, with 13 or 14. So really, I'm going to let the readers decide how much further beyond 5 will be. But of course, the reality is, if I'm really excited about a new story, we'll get a 6th and a 7th and an 8th, because I just like to write.
That's
I think
great.
this is a great character. Yeah.
Now, what did you write before you were writing pirate stories?
Well, my background, believe it or not, is actually as an economist in urban planning. So most of my writing has been in nonfiction and in public policy. But so the fiction really was something that I started with because I just wanted to challenge my brain, and I wanted to try something new, and I really wanted to see if I could look at problems and issues from a different perspective. And fiction is very, very different from nonfiction. So the first manuscript that I have, which still has not been placed, and I now know why it wasn't placed, because it has some problems, was actually about gang life in inner cities. So a lot of my stories are very contemporary. So the Panther Bay series is different in that it's historical fiction, but my other novels typically tend to be very gritty, reality-based adventure stories that are set in contemporary settings. And some of my academic work has been in the area of crime. So I try to think about how criminals respond to different kinds of incentives and the likelihood of being caught, and what motivates them in certain behavior. And a lot of that's been with gangs as well, sort of looking at gang behavior. So it plays really well into understanding the pirate world, because it's very much a sort of an ancient, or not ancient, but sort of an old school gang of sorts in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. But the other novels tend to be more contemporary and more sort of fitting into a 21st century world.
Interesting. Yeah, there's certainly lots of parallels. I have to imagine you're a fan of the Freakonomics guys.
I am. In fact, the Freakonomics guys, what I love about them is they take these sort of obvious, these sort of questions we all have, and then they try and find out why do those things exist? What happens in these very quirky ways. Yeah. And so as an economist, I like it. I like the fact that they're empirically driven as opposed to theoretically driven. So they're really looking at things that we see every day, and then they're trying to figure out how to explain it and what the implications are. And, part of this is, I know we sort of talked about it a bit earlier in terms of pirates. Now we sort of look at criminal behavior. This is criminal behavior. We recognize it for what it is. We certainly wouldn't encourage anyone to go into criminal behavior. Being a part of a gang is not a good thing. Yet we have to explain why the gangs exist. And we have to explain why the pirates exist, because they were a very substantial part of culture and economy and politics of the time. And what we find is that the reality is that there are real important reasons for why these societies and these communities and these gangs existed. And that helps us understand the culture of the times as well.
Do you think that a lot of the same reasons still exist for the reasons that people became pirates are the same reasons that people become gang members now?
I think, yes, actually, I do. If we're talking about historical pirates, we're not talking about the Somali pirates and
Sure.
those types of things. I think that is a different type of pirating in kind and in type. But if we're looking at the pirates of the 17th century, 16th century, and I would argue even Isabella's period, the 19th century, we're looking at people that are still looking for a place to belong. So they find that camaraderie that comes with being a pirate and that identity becomes very important to them, and it also helps define their life. So even we find historically that even if the pirates would get out of the pirating life, very often they would go back into the pirating life. And part of it is also income. So certainly a lot of gangs today are motivated by the money they can earn through selling drugs. But I think the other part of it is that there's this camaraderie that comes with a gang, which makes it a family. And that family becomes really important, particularly for younger members of the gang. What I think is a little different, or there are, of course, big differences, but one of the differences between the pirates of the Golden Age, which is what most people would know, versus gangs today, is that the pirates tended to be older, as opposed to gangs tend to be teenagers and early 20-somethings, whereas you would find older people, if you could survive that long enough in the old pirating world. But the other thing is that there are more formalized institutions in the pirating world for democracy, for governing. They're more mature than what you find in a lot of the urban gangs today, which are much more hierarchical and much more personality driven than the pirate life of centuries ago.
Sure, and it's been argued that pirate crews were certainly on the vanguard of democracy as an idea to begin with. Do you think that's true?
Well, I think that very much is true. There's a really interesting book by Peter Leeson, who's an economist at George Mason University. It's called The Invisible Hook.
Yep.
And he talks about, so you're familiar with the book.
I am. I'm trying to get him on the show. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, when you call Peter, tell him Sam says he's got to be on the show.
All right.
So, all right. Now, Peter and I know each other. And I love the book because I think Peter does a lot of really good research. He's a good economist, and he's also a good historian. And so the point he raises is that a lot of the things that pirates did that people thought were chaotic actually can be explained. And they can be explained by the world in which they operated, the nature of the occupation that they were involved in, and also recognizing that in order to be successful, certain things had to be in place. You couldn't have a captain that just led by the sheer force of his will, because you needed, these were crowded boats. I remember when, we're also talking about smaller boats for the most part. They didn't qualify as ships because they didn't have three masts.
Sure.
So Isabella in the Pirate of Panther Bay captains a brig. That would have been a large boat for a pirate, or historically. So a lot of them are schooners, a lot of them with maybe one or two masts, a lot of them were these smaller, but they also had to have double, triple the size crew in order to be effective in capturing other ships. And so Pete does a great job of sort of explaining how you keep those kinds of people together, in very crowded conditions, which could very easily lead to death. And so that explains why the articles that the pirates would sign were structured the way they were in terms of making sure everybody knew who got what compensation and what kind of compensation would even exist if you were injured, so that there was certainty in terms of the payout, because otherwise, why would you invest your life in this world if you didn't think there was going to be any compensation? It wasn't just because you wanted to drink rum or grog, whatever it might be. So there's a lot of rationality in the pirate world at the time that was also set by the context in which life was expendable. So the human life just didn't have the same value at that time as it does today.
Mm-hmm. It seemed like even the pirate articles gave more of a guarantee of some sort of payment than even like standard government military service did at the time.
Yes, in fact, you could be paid more. And of course, this is one of the things that Peter talks about, is that the one thing that you could do, well, of course, in the British And the major military navies, they had to press people into service because they weren't paying enough to actually get them to voluntarily join. So that created a real sort of a incentive for people to jump ship. But that also meant that pirates had to offer something more than what someone could get if they were pressed onto a ship, either a merchant ship or onto a military ship at the time. So yeah, at the end of the day, no one was well, I can't say that they did actually force some people to sign the articles, and of course that's been a big controversy historically about whether when pirates are captured, if they were forced to sign the articles or it was voluntary. Most pirates were voluntary, and most pirates were also, well, there were substantial portions that were also minorities. I mean, Africans that were on slave ships, which is also built into my stories as well. So there are a lot of pirates on Isabella's ship that were essentially freed from the slavers that joined the pirate crew.
Interesting. The boy, I've been writing comedy bits around a lot of that type of that subject matter and in that time period, which probably will not play in a Peoria comedy club. But I was just reading about a lot of that stuff over the last week or so. So it's really interesting. So I definitely have to check out your books. Now, in a lot of the reviews that I saw for your books, they were very effusive about the fight scenes. Tell me why that is.
Well, first of all, it's by accident. In the sense that I didn't. While they were always action adventure, my goal was not to write great fight scenes. Although I thought good fight scenes were important to move the story along. But what I found is that because I have a background in fencing, and I also have a background in martial arts, that I could add some realism to these fight scenes that maybe other authors could not, or maybe not in the same combination. So all the fight scenes in each of the books is choreographed by me. So in fact, for the Pirate of Panther Bay, I actually remember I would be sitting out at my backyard with my son, and we'd have two swords, real swords, and then I would actually go through how this would actually work in the distance between the two people that are in the fight scene, and what could a sword tip actually get to on the body, or where could it get around the body, but also keep it in a way that it would be fluid, because if you've been a fencer, well, fencing now is a little different because it's very, very fast and it's like lightning fast.
Right.
But if you were in a sword fight, you would have to be more tactical and more strategic, because you're not going for the touch, you're actually going for the kill.
Sure.
And that requires a different set of strategies involved. So each of these fights, whether it's someone, Isabella's jumping onto the ship's deck and she has to go into a roll, all of that is based in real training that I've had in one of these different contexts. So I think what's happened is that realism has really captured the imagination of some of the readers and some of the reviewers too. So, and I'm also, because I know what it takes to actually build to the point where you can be successful in a fight, I think I'm able to build that into the story as well. So it's not just a touch, you're dead. It's also recognizing that fatigue plays into this. And how do you know what you can and cannot do? And how does the adrenaline rush at particular points in the fight? And that type of thing. And so I try to build all of that into those scenes as well.
That's interesting, because I think it's one of those things that people would pick up on subconsciously, because we watch so many unreal fight scenes that are, that we just kind of accept that as the Hollywood standard. But then I think when we read or see one that actually looks legitimate, we would not on any sort of conscious level, but just on a subconscious level go, oh, that seems more real, and not even know why.
Yeah, I think there's a big part of that. I remember watching, what was it, the third Pirates of the Caribbean movie, where they're doing that sword fight in that it was the grain mill.
Oh yeah, the giant wheel. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, I just got bored in that because I just there's some things that work in a movie. I mean, so anything that's visual and has a flash to it really works well in a movie, but you can't do that on the written page because you just can't convey the same level visual interest that would come with that. So I think part of what happens when you're writing these stories in a novel is you have to pay a lot more attention to how you can keep the imagination of the reader. And so they're going to be shorter, but in this case it also means they're more realistic, because most of these, it's very, very difficult to carry on a sword fight for more than a couple of minutes. It is physically exhausting to do that, particularly if you're talking about the blades that they were using at the time, because they were actually heavy. So it's even hard to carry out a martial arts fight. I mean, when we would do sparring in the dojo, for you to be constantly on for 60 seconds or a minute and a half took a lot of effort and a lot of focus. So I think some of my scenes are a little longer than what you would see in the real world, but on the other hand, they don't go into these fantastical levels that just make you wonder, that's got to be Superman out there before there was Superman, that type of thing.
Right. Yeah. I've been to one fencing competition, and I went years ago because my best friend in high school was a fencer, and for the first 2 hours, it was one of the most exciting things I've ever seen, and the additional 6 hours, I was so bored.
Yeah,
because it does move so quick and it's so fast, and you go, "Oh, something happened. Okay, next."
Yep. Yeah. Sometimes you only know that something happened because the light goes off,
right?
And when somebody's gotten a touch, and and so that was, in some ways, it's good that I didn't get to those higher levels of fencing, because I always paid attention to the basics and the fundamentals, which actually allows me to write this better, write these scenes more effectively. Whereas once you get to those higher levels, it's so instinctive that you don't even know what you're doing. Your training is just so good. You're just you're literally letting your body work on instinct. And so you lose touch with the kinds of things that you're actually doing, which become important for writing these scenes.
Yeah, and I think that takes place in any discipline. I know it's why a lot of musicians aren't good music teachers. It's because they have no idea what they're actually doing. Because I teach, and I had to go back and really analyze what I was doing as a guitarist in order to be able to effectively teach it. So I think that happens in a lot of different disciplines. You were you mentioned that you use the fight scenes to advance the plot. What would you do in a fight scene that would advance the plot or give some sort of more depth to the characters?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because the other thing that, here's one of the paradoxes of my novels. I'm not interested in glorifying violence in any way. In fact, I think one of the things I know as an economic historian is that violence actually is destructive to society and community and individuals. So I didn't want to get caught in telling these stories and somehow glorify the violence. In other words, the sword fights can never just be cool. They have to be advancing the plot in some way. So at the end of the day, what a sword fight does, if you're in a sword fight, by the way, if you're in a sword fight, you're not in a good place.
Something's gone wrong.
Right? Something has gone seriously wrong. So it's a challenge to the character on how to get out of it. So you learn a lot about how the character handles adversity. And now, of course, in the case of Isabella, and by the way, there are two other major characters in my series, Jean-Michel, which is an older pirate who actually provides Isabella with a lot of wisdom. He's sort of the sage, or sometimes parent figure, but it's pretty ambiguous if you read the stories. But basically, he's the quartermaster, and he's the one that makes sure Isabella, who's much younger, doesn't just completely go off the deep end. And then there's Juan Carlos, who's actually an army captain in the Spanish colonial army, and that's actually the love interest, which is that allows me to play off a whole different set of issues and values. But back to the fights. So what happens is when Isabella's in a fight scene, either with a sword or whether she's some other close quarters combat, you're getting to see how she handles adversity and pressure. And the other thing that it serves is she's able to demonstrate skills, and those skills become important for keeping the crew in line. Because if the crew does not believe that you can lead them in a fight, they will abandon you and probably actually they'll kill you, or if they don't just unelect you, if they're that type. So it advances each character. So every fight scene moves the character to a different place. They're either more mature, they learn something about themselves, or their enemies learn something about what their capabilities. So it actually makes the next time they meet even more, it raises the stakes even higher. So once Isabella defeats the quartermaster of her rival pirate ship, the rival pirate, then he knows he needs to do something different to defeat her down the road. Sort of the next, or actually down the sea, I guess, in the next, the next time they meet. So it actually builds to the climactic the climactic sea battle in the Pirate of Panther Bay.
Uh-huh.
Similarly, in Tortuga Bay, which is actually a lot of it's set on land, we're dealing more with firearms. And so there's firearms and weapons, so Isabella's out of her element, but the sword still becomes important. But it teaches you a little bit more about Isabella and her adversaries in terms of what are they willing to go, how far are they willing to go to push for the win. And the win becomes really important when it's life and death.
That's great. I now want to make Michael Bay listen to the episode of this podcast so that he has some sort of reason behind his fight scenes.
Yeah. I think, part of what it frustrates me when I go to movies, and now I watch movies all the time about this, I'm just really super critical of movies that just simply use special effects and fight scenes just for the energy they create in the visuals.
Sure.
I'm always looking for, is this necessary? So I'm willing, one of the Supermans, I remember watching him and saying, half of this movie doesn't have to be here because it doesn't advance the plot. How many buildings have to fall down before you know that this is a bad thing for New York? That type of thing.
I've always said that superheroes have done more damage to cities than any criminals ever have.
Yeah. If you're watching these movies, you do not want to live in New York. You do not want to live in Tokyo. You do not want to live in L.A. And on Chicago, on a good day, it might be okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So you put out the first book last year. The second book came out this year. You've got the third book, I think, coming out next year. What is how do you, that's cranking them out. How long, are you writing ahead? Do you already have like 4 books done and you're just putting them out on a scheduled release? Or, that seems like an awful lot of writing coming from somebody who's halfway through a first draft.
Yeah, no, it is a lot of writing. I have a couple of tools available to me. One is I know the plots. So in other words, I've been working on these outlines for a long time, so that helps a lot. The other is it turns out I'm a pretty fast typist. But I also have a lot of people that help me, that I have both beta readers. These are people that read the manuscript that sort of give you insight into whether or not the plot's holding together or the character's going in the right direction. And I have what's called a critique group, where it's about 5 or 6 people that we just go through each other's manuscripts over time. And that has really actually helped strengthen the stories as well as sped up the writing process as well. Mm-hmm. But my publisher is interested in having me come out with one of these every year, and that is a very aggressive time commitment and schedule. And we're going to really push for that. I think the third book can come out. It's going to be toward the end of 2016. And I think it might but I've been really wanting to, what is now the 4th book is one I've been just chomping at the bits to write, because it's the origin story for Isabella. And that frankly won't take me very long at all, because I'm ready to put my fingers on the keyboard and just go. Really, I think it's going to be a really interesting story. It sort of shows how she came to be who she is and how she ended up off the slave plantation. So that's book 4, but we realized after we did book 1 and book 2 that book 3 really had to be chronologically in the same path, because in order to be satisfying for readers. And so sometimes as the author, you have to put your own excitement and enthusiasm for some work on a lower priority, because you have to also honor the reader, and you have to honor what you've promised them. And so right now I've promised them a 3rd book. And if you read Tortuga Bay, it becomes clear. Both books can be read. All my books are written, even though they're in a series, that they can be read independently. But the second book is a richer reading experience if you've read the first book. And similarly, the 3rd book will be, if you've read the first and second, will be much richer as a reading experience. But the 3rd book will also be written, so if somebody just picked it up off the Barnes & Noble shelf, they could read it and enjoy it, and hopefully be really interested in reading the other 2.
That's great. And I'm always intrigued by writing processes, because that's what I spend half of my day doing as well. And you said you do a lot of outlining for the novels. Did you, when you first came across this concept of, okay, an escaped slave becomes a pirate, before you'd even gotten the female protagonist, did you start from an outline right away, or how does that start for you?
My outlines for my fiction are very different from my outlines for my nonfiction. My nonfiction outlines tend to be pretty detailed, and in part because the subject matter sort of begs for detail. Because I'm going to a very specific place in the conclusion. In fiction, you're talking about a story,
right?
And the story unfolds, and there is an organic element to the story. And I'm sure as a comedian, you see that as well. You'll just find that you'll have things start working in the right way, and they build on each other. And it's not just the humor, but it's also sort of where you're going with it. And sometimes it's live, and sometimes it can be something that can be plotted out more formally. For me in fiction, my outlines are guidelines, and they are never blueprints. So what I use is it's helpful for me to know where I think I'm going to end up at the end of the story. And I use that to ground the first 50 to 100 pages. But then after I'm through the first 100 pages, I let the story go by itself and sort of take its own process. Because I find that my characters go in certain places based on the personalities that I've given them and the obstacles that they've run into. And I also find that a lot of things that need to be in the story weren't in the outline, and I only discover that in the writing of the story. And sometimes they go in different places. So the relationship between Isabella and her quartermaster, Jean-Michel, was originally intended to be one relationship, and then the story took it in a different direction. And so if I had forced it to stay in that first relationship, it just wouldn't have been as good of a story. So it's all about guidelines and using it as a way to help direct where you're going, but not being too rigid in the way you apply it.
Now, when do you start showing all these people that you show your drafts to? Are you showing them first drafts or second drafts, or?
Yeah, it depends on where I am in the process. So my process is that I will usually write the first 100 manuscript pages or 150 manuscript pages, and then I will go back and rewrite. Because typically where I am at that point, a third of the way through the story, maybe 25% of the way through the story, it's not where I thought I was when I started out the book. So before I usually have other people reading it, I usually get through an entire manuscript, because by then I know the plot is pretty well set. I know the action is pretty well set. And then my critique group will be brought in earlier, in part because they're very impatient, and in part because they can give you very rigorous, candid feedback, because since they're your best friends, they can basically pummel you and just not worry about you curling up in a ball in the corner and just sobbing for the rest of the night. And that's been very helpful. In Tortuga Bay, for example, the first 3 chapters ended up being really just deleted, because about halfway through the manuscript, the critique group came back and said, you know what, your story really begins on chapter 3. All those previous chapters, it's really kind of fun, and it starts out in a big, sort of fight scene, but you know what, it's not really moving the plot. The story starts chapter 3, start there. And so I ended up cutting out chapters 1 and 2. They are now safely in a file on my hard drive that I'm hoping I'll be able to use someplace else. I don't know if I will, but then the beta readers come in after the complete manuscript is done. And then the beta readers typically look at the entire manuscript. And then after I get feedback from them, I submit it to my publisher. Then the publisher goes through another series of edits. So there are at least 3 levels of edits that go internally with the publisher, where they look at what they call structural editing, in terms of making sure that the characters are actually the same characters at the end as they are at the beginning. Because sometimes we change characters. We say, oh, you know what? That's not really what Jean-Michel would be doing, so I'm going to call him Clyde. And so we'll introduce Clyde. And then Clyde goes through there and said, you know what? Maybe that's not Clyde. Maybe it's Maria. Yeah, Maria's the character that I want to do that. And then so the developmental editing that's done will sort of make sure all those things are consistent and you haven't created these holes inadvertently. And then you go through copy editing, inline editing, and then proofreading, and then it gets into layout and publication.
That's fantastic, and I'm amazed that all that happens so quickly as it does with your release schedule.
Well, what's interesting is that this can happen because I'm working with a smaller press. Smaller presses tend to be more nimble and adaptable, and they also take full advantage of modern technology. And whereas the bigger presses, like the Big Six, are much more cumbersome. It could take 2 or 3 years for a title to get out from the big presses. And so I've been around publishing long enough. I mean, even though I'm now working on my 6th novel, I'm working on my 10th book. I purposely chose Southern Yellow Pine because I knew they could produce a high-quality product. They were a smaller press, which meant I could develop a relationship with the publisher. They were heavily invested in marketing, and I knew they would be nimble enough that if we had deadlines, we could shift the publication schedule. And what I mean by smaller press is not like one title a year. They're producing dozens of titles a year. But the big presses are hundreds of titles, and you get completely lost as an author in those big organizations. And it's not clear to me you get the value out of it either.
Yeah, no, that completely makes sense. It's the same thing in the comedy and music worlds of being with giant agencies and things like that. You just get lost in the shuffle. Right.
So because of that, and because also my publisher has given these books a priority, I'm very fortunate to have that kind of access to the organization and the editing, and also just have a good group of friends that are willing to help me out to make these deadlines.
That's great. Well, Sam, this has been super fun. Everybody needs to go out and find your books right now. I demand it.
That'd be great. Yeah.
And so the first one is called The Pirate of Panther Bay, and the second one is called Tortuga Bay. Does the third one have a title yet?
Not yet. I had a working title, but the working title, based on the initial outline, was before Tortuga Bay came out, and so it's changed. So I'm going to work on the title, but on my website we'll be announcing the title, and we'll also have a cover reveal probably later into 2016. Right now, we're also submitting the books to various book contests, and hopefully we'll get some benefit and awareness out of that as well. So my website. So we don't have a title, but we're continuing to work with the manuscript. I don't need a title to write the book.
Right. I'm gonna suggest you call it "Pay Attention, Michael Bay."
Okay. Okay. Calling Michael Bay. Yeah.
Great. So your website is srstaley.com.
Yes.
And I will definitely link that up in the show notes and all that kind of good stuff. And we will sell some books, man, because these sound like really fascinating ones. I'm going to go get them myself. Great. Is there anything I didn't ask you about that I missed that you want to tell people?
Actually, there's I think one of the other thing I'm proud about these books is that they really do try to hold true to the pirate world. So I really look at these novels as historical fiction. Mm-hmm. So I think anyone who's sort of follows the sort of pirating in the historical context will appreciate the attention I've tried to give that. Although I certainly take some license to create a interesting story with the characters that I have. So if you're one of those people that doesn't believe that there were really female pirate captains, you don't need to read the book. But if you can actually think of a female pirate captain in the historical context of the times, then I think you're really going to enjoy these. And they're not fantastical. So we're not talking about, well, actually, though, in Tortuga Bay, we have voodoo. But the voodoo itself is actually grounded in the actual practice of voodoo, as opposed to sort of the fantasy world of sort of concocting these ghosts and that type of thing that might be great for horror or fantasy, but doesn't quite work in historical fiction. But the voodoo is actually very well grounded in a lot of the practice at the time.
That's interesting. And yeah, historical voodoo is way different than what we think of it as. Did you do a lot of research into that?
Yeah, actually, my bookshelves are getting more and more populated with pirate history and pirate books and voodoo, and actually there's a strong Christian element too, because one of the tensions that plays out in the Pirate of Panther Bay is sort of the time at the time that we're talking about Spain, which was heavily Christian Catholic, as well as France. And so how does that play against the values of the American Revolution, which were about freeing people and giving people individual freedom? And so those kinds of tensions, and that also plays out in Tortuga Bay with voodoo. So I've got actually 3 or 4 bookshelves now that are just lined with research that I can go to, including trying to figure out what the uniforms looked like at the time. And if anybody's interested in learning about Spanish colonial military naval history, good luck. If you're not in the Napoleonic period, it's really, really hard. And I'm just in front of the Napoleonic period. But nevertheless, I was able to track some stuff down without having to travel to Spain to the National Naval Maritime Museum. So, but anyway.
That's great. Well, Sam, this has been super fun. I'm really glad we got a chance to talk.
Oh, Phil, thanks for the opportunity. This has been a lot of fun for me, too. I really appreciate it. And let me know if I can do anything to help you out. And by the way, you need to get your dates of your comedy up on your website.
Oh, on the podcast website? I probably should link those over. You're right.
Yeah, because you're giving all this great exposure to other comedians, which I really enjoy when I listen to your podcast. But I'm thinking, where's Phil? And if you make it to Tallahassee, let me know, because or maybe we can figure out a way to get something going on in the pirate world down in Florida.
For sure. I am actually working on some dates down there, so that would be great.
Yeah, that'd be great to know when that is, because we can help promote it through social media and other ways, too.
Awesome, Sam. Appreciate it, man. It's great talking to you.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
And there it is, friends. That was my interview with Sam SR Staley. Make sure that you go out and you get his books, The Pirate of Panther Bay and Tortuga Bay. You can find them on Amazon.com. I will have links to those on the show notes. You can always hit our Amazon banner too. Help out the show. That's always a nice thing. And so we got some comedy. We got some music. Today, our comedy is from Julian Michael, who is a guy that I met earlier this year at the World Series of Comedy in Las Vegas, which is, you probably heard about me yakking on it on earlier episodes. Great event if you haven't been. Julian started out as one of the wild card guys, one of the earliest rounds, and made it all the way to the semifinals, which is fantastic for him. Very funny dude, so we're going to hear some of that. You can find him... let's back up. SR Staley, you got to go to his website, right? srstaley.com. That seems easy enough. So srstaley.com. You can find Julian Michael at, get this, doubleminorityreport.com. Yes, I know. I don't know why not julianmichael.com. I have to look and see what's on that. But doubleminorityreport.com, I assume double minority because he's both black and gay. So it's all good. Doubleminorityreport.com. You can find Julian Michael and some music today. Now, look, I was thinking, I should play like a Christmas song of some sort. And I went digging around to see who might have a Christmas song. And then I smacked my own forehead, just like that. Smacked my own forehead and went, oh, duh, I have 3 Christmas songs. So I'm going to play you actually a song by my band, Phil Johnson, a Roadside Attraction today, called What Santa Wants. Now, I have to tell you, this song got us banned from ever playing San Jose's Christmas in the Park again. We performed it there. It was the year it came out, and I was working with an agent, and she heard the song, and she went, oh my gosh, we should totally get you guys a Christmas show at Christmas in the Park. Now, Christmas in the Park in San Jose, here in California, is lots of Christmas trees and little displays with little figures that move, and they do like a can drive, and it's all very super family-friendly, wholesome entertainment. So she says, we're going to do this show, and she goes, we'll do it as a Toys for Tots benefit. We'll get a bunch of bands. We'll do it. Great. All right, so we get there. I am dressed as Santa Claus, but not normal Santa Claus, like Santa Claus after a 3-day bender. Because that's what I like to do at a Christmas show. I got the Santa Claus suit on, and I got the beard hanging around my neck, and not around my face, around my neck, and one leg is kind of pulled up, and I don't use the pillow, so I'm like skinny. And so this is what they were faced with. All right, so we're doing the show. People are loving the show. We get to this song that you're going to hear called What Santa Wants, and the crowd loves it. They just go nuts. They love the song. It's wonderful. We do the show. Everything's great at the show. Fantastic. You get a bunch of toys for Tots. It's all fantastic. And my agent calls me the next day and she says, hey, the Christmas in the Park people loved the event. They want to do it again next year. And I was like, yeah, fantastic. Cool. And then she says, but you guys don't get to play. And I said, why? She said, you've been banned from Christmas in the Park. And to this day, that is one of my favorite achievements in my career, is that we've been banned from performing at Christmas in the Park. And so when you hear the song, you'll probably understand why we're not allowed to play there anymore. If you like the song, you can definitely find more from us at roadsideattraction.com or philjohnsоncomedy.com. If you just Google Phil Johnson, I'll come up. It's all the same website, and you can grab it. And I got a bunch of free downloads and stuff for you, too. I got a couple other Christmas songs that I throw around this time of year. I'll put them in the show notes for this show at underthecrossbones.com/020. All right, we're going to do that. Are you ready? Here it goes. Comedy from Julian Michael and some Christmas music from Roadside Attraction. Here we go.
2 black people in a row. I know. I come in peace, white people. I come in peace. Listen, I'm what you call a token minority, okay? I'm the black guy that white people call when they want their group to appear diverse but remain non-threatening. Understand? I'm available for bachelor parties, bar mitzvahs, bridal showers. Look, any situation that needs most of the rhythm and none of the danger. Holla at your boy. I got you. You need to know. No, I need to tell you the rules up front, because look, if some real shit should happen while we're out together, you are on your own. Understand? Take it all in. Look, I'm built for speed, not for combat. Understand? I will run away, goddammit. Keep it real. If some black people try to mess with us while we're out together, I'm not even gonna run away. I'm just switching teams. You might hear, "Give me your wallet," and you're gonna turn and look at me, and I'm gonna say, "You heard us."
Uncle Phil, tell us a Christmas story.
I don't know, kids. You know what happened last year.
Please.
Well, okay.
A Christmas gift. Red Rider be gone to give my wood a little lift. Said I'd shoot my eye out, but I sent to anyway. I put out the milk and cookies and woke up on Christmas Day to find 2 packs of underwear, a turtleneck, and a book on the chemical composition of fossils found in Antarctic glaciers. But I got a new trick to make Santa Claus give me everything I want. 'Cause I know what Santa wants, what Santa wants, what Santa wants, yeah! He wants a bottle of whiskey, 2 hookers, and a line of cocaine. Santa's damn generous when he's a feeling no pain. Cookies and milk are nice, but it just ain't the same. Yeah, a bottle of whiskey, 2 hookers, and a line of cocaine. Went on a search to get what I need, and I found it in my hood. Met a guy who had the stuff to get Santa off real good. Said Christmas time is yours this year. The fat man, he love these chicks. They do this special Christmas trick with tree flocking, curling ribbon, and eggnog. But I got a new trick to make Santa Claus give me everything I want. 'Cause I know what Santa wants, what Santa wants, what Santa wants. Bottle of whiskey, 2 hookers, and a line of cocaine. Santa's damn generous when he's feeling no pain. Cookies and milk are nice, but it just ain't the same. Yeah, a bottle of whiskey, 2 hookers, and a lot of cocaine. A guitar. Take a little peek at the man with the beard, see what I could see. Did the line and he did the booze, but he hadn't touched the hose. Could Santa be gay? Huh? Oh no, there he goes. But I got a new trick to make Santa Claus give me everything I want. 'Cause I know what Santa wants, what Santa wants. A bottle of whiskey, 2 hookers, and a lot of whiskey, 2 hookers, and a lot of cocaine. Has a bottle of whiskey, 2 hookers, and a lot of cocaine. Has a bottle of whiskey, 2 hookers.
Dad, is that you?
There it is, friends. That's our show for today. We have reached 20 episodes. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this show, please go leave us a nice iTunes review. That would be fantastic, not only for me, but for the show and for the community and for all the listeners so that I can keep doing this show. If you want to support the show with some financial type of money thing, or even just click an Amazon banner, go to underthecrossbones.com/support. If you want to check out more from SR Staley and pick up his books, the Panther Bay series, you can go to srstaley.com. That's Staley, SRSTALEY.com. If you want to hear more comedy from Julie and Michael, go to doubleminority.report.com. And if you want to hear music from Phil Johnson and Roadside Attraction, hey, that's me. You know that's me. You can go to roadsideattraction.com and check it all out. Make sure you're subscribed. Keep leaving those iTunes reviews. Keep telling your friends. You are what makes this show keep going, and I want to keep doing it for you. Until next week, my friends, hoist the sails. See you then.